No matter how you travel, it's good to have a plan. Some people plan every minute. No sleep, bus, museum, another museum. While others only plan to take it day by day. When it comes to your finances, a plan is just as important. You can count on Credit Karma to give you the insights you need to understand your options so you can take charge of your financial path and find your way to money. Explore how you can make financial progress with confidence today. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Minahan. Thank you for joining Talk Cosmos. We have a panel today that I'm really excited about. Always the information and how we can dialogue and connect with you. Ultimately, we're sensing this balancing beam of life. It's like a teeter-totter because it's signaling deep change, and we're evolving our focus and our actions. So let's just see how we put this all together today with U.S. global currents, an astrological perspective. I'm ready to go.
Examining significant United States domestic politics and foreign affairs through the astrological perspective of the celestial map of the sky to understand the impact on each individual around the globe, this is your U.S. Global Currents panel.
I'm Sue Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
I'm Robert Pizzetti, professional consulting astrologer and the visionary behind Deep Earth Astrology and the Deep Earth Astrology Tarot, a divination tool and teaching aid that integrates astrology, herbalism, and natural reverence. I specialize in vibrational and psychological techniques and infuse my practice with a deep connection to nature's spirituality. I'm currently the Grand Pendragon in the Ancient Order of Druids in America and the director of the Magus Gathering in Gore, Virginia.
I'm Justin Crockedelzy, an archetypal Jyotish astrologer, yoga and meditation teacher, and author. I combine both Western ancient astrology and modern psychological astrology with Eastern Vedic astrology, and I specialize in predictive, electional, and karmic astrology for individuals and couples. I also do in-depth astrological research into arcane astrological concepts, focusing on the mystical, occult side of astrology.
And I'm John Chinworth, a Seattle astrologer with more than 25 years' experience. I use a blend of evolutionary, traditional, and archetypal techniques and constantly attend workshops and lectures to further hone my skills. I hold an MFA in Poetics, an MA in Teaching, and an astrological diploma. I've lectured at NORWAC and served on the WSAA board. I have worked in general and special education classrooms, both as a teacher and mentor. I also enjoy reading, penning poems, riding a bike, and going on road trips around the great state of Washington.
Rock musician Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention says, "A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open." Well, I think the teeter-totter of life is just going bonanzas. John's no longer on this, but we wish him well.
Welcome, John in spirit.
Yes, exactly. And NORWAC and all that good jazz. Gee whiz, really, teeter-totters. It brings to mind because as a young child, I lived with other people. And I remember this little girl and I used to teeter-totter. And it was so much fun, except you have to learn how to teeter-totter with people. You can land pretty harshly. And it is not fun. You have to have long legs to kind of cushion it. She left, went to school, no more teeter-totter friend. But life goes on. Well, thank you, Justin Crockett-Elsey and Robert J. Pizzetti. It is good to have your energetic souls to join me on this teeter-totter experience today. Yeah, how are you both anyway?
Good. Yeah, we're excellent. I think that we've been doing this together for a little while now, so we got a good idea of what's happening. We've been doing this for over a year now, and it's just the craziness of what's going on. And I hate to say it, but the stars have been right about everything, and they've gotten to this point. So let's see where it goes from here.
Yes, and interestingly, I was trying to write different things up, and I realized that right now, because all the planets are direct, that we'll be seeing that. Will we be seeing that with this chart? And perhaps we will. No, it's another. We're doing a transit chart, aren't we? Because the retrograde paths take us back, just to what you were saying, back to October with Mars before the elections and all of that, and then with Venus back to February, which is just after the elections, and with Mercury back to mid-March, which happened to be the first shipment of folks out of.
And just to comment on that, I mean, one of the big changes we're going to be seeing is we've been through a very strong personal planet retrograde period, and now on the back half of 2025, we're going to be going into a big outer planet retrograde period. So, the shift from the personal to the collective is definitely going to start being a theme. And we're right in that kind of, teeter-totter period, as you said, where we're in that direct period between those two things.
Yes. You must be feeling it too, Justin. You're sitting there going,
I'm just waiting to get into the charts here. So
okay. We have 4 of them. We're going to do 2, thank you. 2 for the first half, 2 for the second. There was a good collaboration of minds here because the world is pretty active. We're going to begin with a bi-wheel showing China, its natal chart that is in focus at this point on October 1st, 1949. And then with a bi-wheel of today's current transits. And then finishing up the first half, we're going to do a bi-wheel with the 2 presidents of the United States and El Salvador. In the second half, then we will shift over to the court and the law. We will look at the U.S. Supreme Court. Its natal chart was after the United States was ratified and had its new constitution. And that was in February 2nd, 1790. And then we'll do a bi-wheel with that U.S. chart because noticing it, I realized it's had another Saturn return. Its Saturn is in Pisces. So that was on March 3rd, 2025. And I'm really excited to get there. Okay, let's begin. Here we are with this China chart.
Go ahead, Justin. I know you've been chomping at the bit.
No, one of the things that's interesting about this chart, I think, is as you know, we know that China's known for and what its relationship is around the world for most countries is its trade. And so we see a stellium in the natal chart here and the sun in the 8th house, right? There's a stellium in both the 2nd and 8th houses here, which deal with foreign trade, money, values, and of course the sun is being in the 8th house there. One of the things to note, because I like looking at what cycles countries go through or people go through, and one thing that jumped out to me with this chart is that China just ended an 18-year cycle. They had a nodal return. And we know those nodal returns happen every 18 years. So I looked back, and 18 years ago, 2005, to see where they were at and see what's changed. In 2005, when George Bush was president, China tripled its trade surplus with the world. And also there was a major trade agreement with the Southeast Asian nations. Now, 18 years later, they're now at $992 billion trade surplus with the world, still going like gangbusters. And that trade agreement that they did with Southeast Asia, it's in its 3rd iteration. So it definitely, this is interesting, is that they're going through some transition stuff. And there's a couple other things I'll point out, but I'm just curious what yours and Sue's initial perspective of the chart was.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what you were saying, I mean, that there is a sun trine moon situation going here, and really what that means when we're talking about political astrology is there is ultimately a peaceful relationship between the leadership and the people. Now, the 12th house, when we're talking about political astrology, is often about the undercurrents of the institutions. And in Aquarius, I mean, that is very communistic in a lot of ways. So, the heart of the people are in this communist, regime. And as time goes on, because it is a waxing relationship between the sun and the moon, that relationship will strengthen as time goes on. So while this, obviously it's not been without issue, but ultimately the transition into a communist nation was something that was going to benefit the moon, whereas in mundane astrology, the moon represents kind of what we would traditionally call the lower class. It's the most vulnerable people in society.
Yeah.
Mars, I notice, and this is excellent, both of what, but just to continue here, is approaching a return, which happens every couple of years. But amazingly, as we've discussed, and you brought up, Rob, particularly in our conversation, that Mars is conjunct natally to Pluto. And of course, we have these ingress, these large outer planets, Neptune, and then impending in May 26th, Saturn entering Aries. So I think Mars is going to be a very dynamic, active, change ingredient. And it's interesting to see that in the 7th house, because you were bringing up the communist, the flow that works between the collective and the relationships, and their change is in the 7th house.
Mm-hmm. Well, the 7th house is allies when we're talking about nations. I mean, the 7th house is the allies. And, really what that means is they are aggressive and dominating in terms of their relationship with their allies. I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than that. What would you think about that, Justin?
Well, and in another word for the 7th house also is foreign policy. Mm-hmm. So they're very aggressive with their foreign policy. And of course, it's predicated through their trade. Because, and also I forgot to point out, they also have Eris on that north node in the 2nd house as well in Aries. So they're always going to be a powerhouse with trade and money. And that's that Mars Pluto conjunction, as you rightly pointed out, and they're having that Mars return there. So it is going to, I think, with the Mars return hitting that there will be some changes coming in their foreign trade. I think based on a couple other things too, they're going to go through some changes here over the next 5 to 6 years that are pretty big, because they're going to have a Neptune opposition. And when that happens, when Neptune gets into that 14 degrees Aries, they're going to go through some transition. So they're going through an evaluation, and also there's going to be some change in their leadership in the next 6 years too, because Juno will hit that Chiron in the 10th house, which is leaders. So I think it's, and I was also going to say that South Node hits their Saturn coming up. So I would say, and that's later this year, I would definitely watch what happens in the last quarter this year with them, especially concerning Taiwan. And, with the Mars about ready to hit that Mars-Pluto conjunction.
It is interesting that natally that Mars-Pluto does trine their North Node there in the 2nd house, that you're showing about their resources and their sense of survival. And it's in Aries. Of course, Mars rules it. But before I leave, the Pluto right now is sitting right on the moon, which will stay there. It's been going between 3 back to 1, I think, and then it'll go back to 3. So it's a lot of change for that public, for the greater population.
When we're talking about mundane astrology, when we see a moon on Jupiter, that's usually a good thing. It's that the resources are now flowing and expanding from the institution to the people. But in the 12th house, and especially with the Pluto there and the moon in reversal, government is essentially asking them for a period of austerity. This really, to me, just says that the institution is in trouble, but we're going to put plans in place to make sure that you're going to be okay. And China has an ability to do that in a way that the U.S. does not, because they have the private-public partnership within their communist capitalist system. So China can essentially say to their big corporations, hey, we need you to put $95 billion into the economy right now. It's not something that would happen here. We're not going to ask Jeff Bezos for $95 billion and he's going to provide it. They don't have a choice over there in China. I don't know if you remember, there was an incident with one of their CEOs. I believe it was Alibaba, by the name of Jack Ma. He was one of their leaders of industry, and he started talking about the communists in a way where he wanted to move it towards capitalism, and he went away for a year, and when he came back, he was all on board with the communism. So you can see through these two aspects how there will be prosperity, but this is also a time where they are asking for everything to kind of be brought into line. That Pluto is really saying, the government is the plutocrat.
Yeah. And thank you.
And I
go
agree.
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sue.
No. I was just going to support, Justin, what you brought up in the very beginning. I started thinking about the trade and going back and that whole theme. So lead on. Yeah.
No, I want to piggyback. I think Robert brings up a really good point. I when I was looking at the chart before the show, I was like, oh, they're going to go through some pain as well with this. Even though they're a powerhouse in the world, they're going to go through some pain because that Chiron, at transient Chiron at 23 degrees is on their Sedna, and which means that they're going to have to kind of step out. There's going to be some pain within the individuals, and also with the South Node going to hit the Saturn. That's sort of an austerity measure. But also second chances in life. And so that's why I was saying, watch what happens with Taiwan. Also, that's their psyche is over in that area. But speaking about the Pluto, one thing I would also note about that as soon as it goes over their ascendant, that changes the way they're perceived in the world. So China is going through, just like we're going through this crazy transformation. China's got its own transformations going on. And like you said, I think that Pluto on that moon is the psyche or the subconscious of the Chinese people is changing, and how they're seen in the world will be changing when Pluto goes over their ascendant, and then they have the Neptune transit opposition. There's going to be a shift in this country in some way.
It's a packed affair. Thank you. I think we've really touched on issues.
But yeah, they're going to go through some pain as well.
Oh, collectively,
but they'll come out of it. They got that sun in that eighth house, and that I think Mars Pluto can be very, very powerful.
It's absolute dynamic.
Yeah. They can weather this storm is what I got from this chart. Yeah,
totally. But how the relations affect, as it is in the seventh house with relations, this is an emerging dynamic part, and perhaps more of the world will be connecting in many ways. We have Pluto in Aquarius right now, and as it is going through, their ascendant, as you say, it could be that we'll wait and see. We have, wrong one, darn. There, Donald Trump and Nayib Armando Bukele Artes, the president of it's El Salvador, except that when I get his birth date, it always wants to do it in San Salvador, because that's what the city he was born in. He was born on July 24th, 1981. At 5, and we did a rising, thanks to Justin's encouragement here, when the sun is rising, because we don't know the time of day, but it's always a good chart then. And it's 5:43 a.m. Central Standard Time, whereas Donald Trump, as we know, are the ones we've been using, is June 14, 1946 at 10:54 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in Queens, New York.
I find this chart very interesting, especially because Nayib Ortiz has the great conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter right on top of the Donald Trump's Neptune. Essentially, a great conjunction is a reset of a cycle. It's a good indicator of the beginning of a new generation, a new way of thought, a new way of doing things. And it really, I feel like, enamors, almost enchants Donald Trump's sense of values in the second house. Like, seeing what he's doing down there is like, ooh, we can do it this way. Wow, this cuts out a lot of steps. We can just send people down to El Salvador. So there's this kind of even though it is obviously a very, very harsh thing, this idea that Donald Trump has that Ortiz is the new generation. He's coming in with new ideas and new ways of handling things, and is really speaking to Donald Trump's sense of enchantment with the world and his essentially like how he perceives his own values from a collective standpoint.
Yeah, when I looked at those two charts, I immediately thought of J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is also a Leo, also has a Sun Pluto conjunction with in synastry with Donald Trump. So there's that a little daddy energy going on there with Trump.
Yeah.
But and the other thing that kind of jumped out to me here, and I'm going to get to those Libra here in just a second, but is that Ortiz's Neptune is on his south node moon, which to me is, so wherever Neptune is, it shows how a person is perceived in the world. And I think this is an auspicious thing between them. I mean, I think this is Donald Trump's south node and moon. It's helping elevate Ortiz within the collective. Neptune's the collective planet. So there's a relationship, almost a mothering type of relationship, that he's elevating Ortiz with Ortiz Neptune on the south node. However, getting to the Libra, Donald Trump's relationships eventually go south. He's got the Chiron there next to Juno and that Jupiter and Neptune, all of that there. So, nobody from his first administration is in his second administration. I mean, pretty much, because his relationships go south. What's interesting here is they have a Pluto Chiron conjunction here. Eventually, this relationship's going to go south. It is sort of, and that's what I've always said about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. Eventually, there will be some dynamics that changes there. But I think this is definitely they both have Mercury in Cancer, so they both kind of think and communicate alike. But they also have some semblance and feeling about how do I say people and family and lineages and tribalism. There's some sameness in tribalism here with all the Cancer stuff. But of course, there's some dynamics there that's just wrong. Saturn is there, and then the Hygiene Mars there. But I think eventually they're helping each other out here, but eventually it's going to go south.
I agree. And that really we're looking at those kind of, those opposite Neptune aspects to major things in their charts. And, the moon conjunct the south node, a Sagittarius moon is optimistic. It's philosophical, but Ortiz wants to move past that. He doesn't want to be, optimistic, or he wants to be harsh. And, the south node is what you're moving away from. And Donald Trump, in his whatever you want to call it, milieu, exudes that kind of thing, that authoritarianism that he wants to move towards and get, he's getting away from his own moon and moving towards this kind of sense of Donald Trump's enchantment. And it's very interesting to me. And I agree with you that this is kind of a relationship of opportunity. And that's about as far as it goes. What would you say about the stuff going on between in the 12th and right at the ascendant?
I have a comment about that. That exactly. I've been staring at that as you both have spoken, because Mars and Venus in vibrational astrology is hands-on. You have to do something with your hands. It's an activity, and it's attractive. What's beautiful for you, and some kind of action. And they're right on the ascendant with Ceres, that has everything to do about grief, whether you wield grief, whether you experience grief, and how you manage to claim, you're nurturing through grief. But it's right on that ascendant at 29 degrees Leo, which also is right now, Regulus is 0 degrees Virgo. So it's right there on Regulus. And the problem, not the problem, but the glory and the problem with Regulus is, yes, you can have your fame to claim, but not for yourself. And when you do that, you fall. So it's a name of it's a matter of, I don't know, Russian roulette or something, where eventually the fall will come. But it is interesting that they have those two, the lovers, you could say, the Venus and the Mars connection, but also how it's manifesting into the prison system. I'd like to see, how does that come up? I mean, there is Aries and... Mm-hmm.
Well, and I want to point out something that I want to go back to the money aspect here, because that's pretty much a foundation of the relationship is really money. The United States is paying them to hold all these prisoners.
$15 million.
So it's a financial relationship. Plus, true. Donald Trump's elevating this Ortiz on the world stage a little bit by way of relationship there. But in that 8th house, their heiresses, actually, I know we don't have it on this chart, but on that outer chart there, Ortiz's Pholus, which represents sudden change and dynamics, that centaur is on Donald Trump's heiress. And then, of course, vice versa, that Aries and Hygeia, they're between the two of them. So I think eventually, and then there's also in the Taurus, there's some... we don't have it on there either. The Nessus or one of the other is centaurs is in Nessus and Taurus. So there's going to be some break at some point. That changing of money is going to become a little bit. There's going to be some conflict about that. I believe.
Seems like it's a football with the Senate, but yeah.
To back you up, I mean, that second house, while all the planets are in Libra, it's a Virgo ruled house. So that is very much like, a relationship based on spreadsheets, a relationship based on balance sheets, based on the nitty gritty of what we need to do. So that makes a lot of sense, what you just said.
Well, and Sue, to your point about the prison, so I'd go to the 12th house. And of course, Donald Trump has that Pluto there, right? I mean, and that Mars there. There's definitely some underlying psychological stuff going on there. I don't even get into that with Mars there, but I think that's where Ortiz's North Node, Rahu, the demon head, is right on his sun there. That can be a negative thing, and it's, I think it together, the two of them express they were talking about when they were in the Oval Office. So there was, of course, the dynamics. I won't say what show with Zelensky. Well, just the opposite. That what I think it was Rolling Stone said. Two dictators are convincing over. I forget what they said. Whether it was dictators over human rights abuses. And I think that's sort of that prisons. Sue, you're talking about the 12th house there. They have a lot of sinking up there in the Leo area.
Thank you. And before we go, because I realize it's time, I have been reflecting how this entire ordeal just brings illumination to the reality of prisons that I think the public is surprised that exists, and probably throughout the world. I remember back when we were having those with Afghanistan, so many names and people and parts on the map that became public into our, everyday life, names. And the same now with prisons. I think prisons, because we have South Node in Pisces, makes great sense. It is the weak, the infirm, that aren't able to deal with the greater forces of life, you might say. But here with that sun and that Pluto and the North Node, all of that focus with Mars, everything contriving. Whew. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be curious what you all think about the Cancer, because that's very well about tribal.
Yes, and also tribal. It's my tribe.
Tribalism here. Yes, we're dealing with families and immigration. And Ortiz is definitely not conducive to that. He's got that Mars Hygeia conjunction there. That's not really happy for families or tribes.
No, and especially in the 11th house. I mean,
That's it.
we're not talking about just families. We're talking about communities,
Yeah.
So that takes it to the next level. And it's just that Mars, on top of that Mercury, that relationship there, his action on top of Donald's words is telling of what's going on. So I agree with you. I think the 11th house is really kind of telling the story portion of what's happening versus the rest of these aspects we've talked about are talking about their personal relationship.
And then you look at the moon, that just spot the ruler of it.
Yeah.
And those all have, as we've mentioned, a lot of
And just to end on this, you talked about Regulus. Regulus is one of the 4 royal stars of Babylon. That was the star they chose when they selected their king. So I mean, being on the ascendant right now, he's definitely feeling like he is the king.
Right.
But
and
for what purpose? So if it's for himself, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I meant to also say Ortiz has a progressed moon right now in Sagittarius. So he's in an expansive so that's highlighting that Neptune moon right there. And he's actually, it's in the first 5 degrees. So he's on this track of like getting noticed and recognized and expanding right now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I know we're a little past, but it'll all work out. And I was just trying to notice suddenly what's going into Aries, but that will, if nothing else, be squaring all the Cancer, and we'll just see life is moving on. All right. Thank you. We'll be back, folks. U.S. Global Currents with Justin Crockett-Elsie and Robert J. Passetti and myself, Sue Minahan. Stay with us. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Taurus. By leaving a cycle based upon initiation, the energy of Taurus integrates spirit into a solid form of matter that is tangible and physical. It's an earth sign, concerned with self-sufficiency and the values to maintain the strength of a life form throughout its survival.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
This is Martha Norwalk, every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m. Thanks in part to Natasha Venter at intuitiveclarifications.com, we cover the world of animals. This week, April 27th, is an encore presentation. Join us to hear our last healing show with Dr. Nils Rasmussen and Sister Linda Rasmussen. Together, they helped callers and their animal friends with emotional, behavioral, and physical issues. You can receive a surrogate healing just by listening and following Linda's instructions. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Alternative Talk 1150. Talk radio for the body, mind, and soul.
Okay. We have Justin Crockett-Elsie. Yes. And you can connect with him at his email, Justin. Well, lead on. Speak a little bit, Justin. How can people find you?
You're exactly right. Thank you, Sue. That's the best way to get a hold of me is justin.elsie@gmail.com, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and he does have a YouTube channel. It's Astrological Yogi, and he does Zoom consultations because he does a lot of consultations. And Rob, you have, I don't know if we have next the conference.
Yeah, you can reach me at deepearthastrology@gmail.com. I do natal readings, and I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, we'll have to upgrade this slide. And Fractal Cosmos. Perhaps
Yes.
you want to say
We are starting the only vibrational astrology focused conference. It's going to be on Labor Day weekend, August 29th through 31st. You can join anywhere from online. There's 2 tracks. There's a track for people who are complete beginners to harmonic and vibrational charts, just to, get your toe in the water, see if that's something you want to pursue. And then there is an advanced track. We actually have the founder of vibrational astrology, Santino Mancuso, also known as David Cochran, and leading researcher Linda Berry will be there as well. So pretty much the people who are doing the breakout work in the sphere of vibrational astrology will be there presenting their new work, and we will have a cadre of presenters there to teach beginners as well. You can find us at fractalcosmos.org.
Thank you. It will be an excellent introduction to find out really what is it. It's more than, it's beautiful. So YouTube, I'm going too fast. Talk Cosmos, my YouTube channel. I have in the past, I have different panels, and coming up will be one on the moon and the cycles, and last week was the opposition with Mars and Pluto, and then I'm also Astrology Star Sisters, and we're doing one about, I used, looking at the dwarf situation, I used it Neptune at 0 degrees, because it ties together a lot of transformation. Let's get to the U.S. court. That's what's exciting. February 2nd, 1790.
I spent a lot of time looking at this chart. The most fascinating thing to me is that the sun is on the bending of the nodes. Now, what that really means is that the sun is square to the south and the north node. And the position of Aquarius, because Scorpio is the north node, is so the sun is at the north node bending. So anytime you have a sun on the bending of the nodes, you're talking about a direction forward that is very much influenced by the feeling of a sacred purpose, a destined purpose. And Aquarius is, it's progressive by nature. It wants to move forward. It wants to, and in a court, it just seems like a kind of a perfect way to express that. What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
Well, I was actually, I was looking at a lot of the analysis I did was with the transits, but one of the things that really jumps out to me is just sort of thinking about the makeup of the court. We have that in the ninth house, which is rules courts. We have that Juno there in Sagittarius. So, and it's an auspicious thing. They're always trying to find some sense of harmony with their belief systems there, their philosophy at Sagittarius, but it's opposing Chiron. And that's really jumped out to me, that this court has a Chiron in Gemini. So it's always going to have some struggle in communicating what it's trying to get out to the collective. And of course, it's got that Jupiter retrograding, Uranus retrograding, Mars retrograding. So there's going to be always sort of an issue with how it's seen within the collective, that it's not doing the right thing at the right time, and it's not changing like it should, and it's not going to really sometimes step up to the plate like it should. There is this whole thing that it moves slowly. And we see that with that South Node in Taurus. I was reading an article in New York Times yesterday. There's this whole thing. There's all these turtle statues around the Supreme Court, because they always talk about how justice moves really slow. And that's that South Node in Taurus, and they were kind of shocked because this one emergency thing that just came out yesterday was unusual for the court. It's starting to move a little bit faster. But so that's initially. I got some other notes there, but I'll say that.
Yeah, the next slide might bring up closer, but let me just say something first, and that is just to tie this up so we can move on to that, and that is with that T-square, which is brought up with the nodal axis, that Aquarius, of course, elevates. That's it's just to piggyback off of what you're saying, that's the whole idea of the community. It wants to elevate and bring up humanity to its highest good. And in the South Node, just archetypally speaking, of course, it's survival of resources and survival of self and as the individual. But where we're heading to is so much of exchange of resources, and to remember that really it's ruled by two planets, not just Mars, which happens to be with its, because it's so much fixed energy here, right? But it's also with Pluto. And of course, Pluto and Mars are opposite, and both of them are activating. There's a lot of action in, I think, underneath in that court that goes on. That is, but they have to voice their ideas, because with Jupiter and Mars connected, Jupiter has to express itself. Mars is going to act on it, and it's in Leo. Thank you. So,
but it's retrograding. But it's
well, yeah, that's true.
So there's going to be an issue there.
And the other thing that feeds into what both of you are saying, that really kind of probably gums up the works in a lot of ways, is that conjunction between Hygeia and Mercury in Pisces, especially. Pisces is everything all at once, trying to kind of deal with everything in a way focused on purity and health and making sure that, everything is going well. But Mercury in Pisces does not operate well. There's a lot of patchwork that goes on with the Supreme Court, a lot of confusing edicts that come out from the court. Too. And it's also a lot of like putting things off. And I think that feeds into what Justin was talking about with those retrogrades. It's like they're so in the milieu and the mix of things and focusing on making sure that their decisions are right and pure for the nation. But Pisces doesn't make that easy, and either do those retrogrades with Jupiter and Mars.
And it's also quincunx. I'm supporting what you're both saying. I noticed that you have Jupiter exactly quincunx to that Venus in Pisces at 27 degrees. Therefore, they are needing to learn. It's not just an irritation. It's like the values and the philosophies, the law has to be connected, and they don't have that. It's a constant process.
I still believe, though, at the end of the day, the primary driving force of the Supreme Court is going to be that sun on the bending of the nodes, and that feeling like they have a sacred, destined duty to do something.
Well, then let's look at the Saturn return that they just had. Thank you. That's March 3rd. That happened to be at 11 a.m.
So, Robert, you go for this because you were talking about this, and then I'll bring a couple other things.
Yeah, I mean, the bending of the nodes, what we were talking about, Vest is there. Okay, I mean, that's their focus right now, is feeling like that they're ordained, that they are the one, they are the deciders, they are the ultimate, they are the, that North Node is in Scorpio, seeking the ultimate truth. They're focused on focusing on the ultimate truth of what we're supposed to be doing, and it's being driven by that sun. I do not feel, though, that this Supreme Court was ever intended to be a conservative leaning court. And I know that sounds like a political statement, but it's not, because, you have that intense need for progression, that intense need for moving forward, not moving backward. If we were in Capricorn, I would have a completely different attitude about this. But because we are seeing the progressive nature of Saturn, not the restrictive nature of Saturn, when we're looking at a sun on the bending in Aquarius, in my opinion.
And that makes sense, because the North Node is in Scorpio. They're supposed to transform, and if you're too conservative, you want to stay fixed, and you don't want to transform. So that Scorpio has transformed. I might say something interesting about their current. The Supreme Court actually has a current progressed moon in Taurus. So they're going through some level of trying to stay valid right now with that. And because progressed moon in Taurus for the court is going to want to try to show its value. and try to, because of course because of all some of the controversial decisions, of course, and now the Trump administration creating a constitutional crisis and ignoring them, they're going to really push towards trying to, with that Taurus progressed moon, show their value. And of course, I think they're going to have some issues with that, because Jupiter's about ready to hit their Chiron. And Jupiter transit over their Chiron will inflate the issues of communications. I also looked a little bit into the future here, because in 27 there's an interesting thing that's going to happen. They'll have their Jupiter return, but at the same time, the South Node and Mars will be there in that Leo. So they're having a Jupiter and a Mars return and a South Node in that Leo point in a couple of years. So there's some things that are going to happen there.
I went back and I looked at, we just, the nation itself just went through its Pluto return. Okay. And I went back to looked at some other empires in history, and at around the 240, 250 year mark, there is always this significant change of the structure of government. Even back to Rome, the 240 year mark, I think it was, 520 BC, they went from a monarchy to more of an expansive council government. Now, this was still very early on in the Roman Empire, but also with some of the Germanic stuff, went from a very tribal nation to a more focused in nation. There's always this sense of a transition to who is the plutocrat and what does the plutocrat represent when we have these Pluto returns. And the thing about this chart, and why I'm bringing that up, is because the court wasn't formed until 1790. So the court is not prepared for the transition that we're having in government, because it is not ready yet to transform with it. It's still, just like you were saying with the nodes there, it's this concept of entrenchment in Taurus versus, transformation with Scorpio. And because there's a misalignment in those Pluto returns, it just seems like they're almost outmoded. They're almost outdated. And they're not ready. They're not in a position to handle the crises that we're dealing with now.
Yeah,
I'm looking at Chiron because this is their Saturn return. Just to bring up to our audience what I'm bringing up here, why it's so important. But Chiron at 20 degrees transiting right on the ascendant, 20 degrees Aries, happens to be the U.S. natal Chiron. And we just spent several programs here. The last one, in fact, that we had in February was about the Chiron return at that degree. So it's very interesting. And I want to hear from you both, because what you're presenting exactly works with the transformation with the public, the identity, not only of the court, but of course the court's supposed to be one of the three checks and balances for the United States. We have the legislation, the executive, and the court system. So to fulfill that job, as you say, they need to elevate. They can't be just set in some fixed format. And with this Chiron right there, especially since right now, as we see that an impending Mars return is coming, because here at the Saturn return, Mars was at the 17 degrees Cancer, which started back in October 6th, when it's in that path and in the very beginning. And now it's in Leo, and it will be having a Mars return. But that Chiron there that represents the United States identity and leadership, presidents.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all fits. I think it fits together, and I think that you can see what's going on in the 12th house really initiates with, you don't want a Saturn return happening in the 12th house because it becomes hidden from you. You don't get the lesson. It becomes something that weighs on you internally, and you are not able to really kind of manifest it into everything else going on in the chart. It's hidden. And when I think that is, going to feed into what the result of this Chiron is. Chiron in Aries is, you're not feeling like you have sovereignty or the ability to strike out as an entity, and that they do feel a little neutered. They're very cautious. They don't want to go too far on one side. They're trying this balancing act, but at the same time, it's a completely unbalanced court in terms of the philosophical, values that they have. So it's just. Am I surprised that Neptune is in Pisces in the 12th house? For this, no. There's this everything all at once sense of confusion, a lesson that's not going to be learned, and almost an impotence from that Chiron and Aries in the 12th house sitting right on the ascendant.
Well, and I may note that Chiron, transiting Chiron, is trining that Juno in the 9th house of philosophy, of all that political philosophy. So there is a wound. And I think that to your point, Sue, to the collective with how they're seeing with Chiron going over their ascendant, there's, the collective is disappointed here. The collective is, they're seeing it that they don't have value. Eris is right there. And of course, but the court, again, I totally agree with what Rob you're saying there. The court is slow. It's going to be slower, or it's going to have some struggles now because they have a progressed moon in Taurus, so they're going to be a little bit slower even now, or try to express what value they have, and I think that's ultimately, though, they're supposed to transform because the North Node being in Scorpio.
Yeah. Looking at these other factors of this Saturn return, just to bring people's mind that, yes, it's a transit, but this is a Saturn return transit. And looking at two factors, I'm sorry, Gemini here. One is the asteroids, that we have several that are having a return, interestingly, coming up. One with Juno that you just mentioned, and the other which is there in the 9th house for folks in Sag. And then the other would be Pallas Athena, the strategist, which happens to be essentially happening at that moment up there in the 10th house in Aquarius also. And in addition, so there's those two things happening. I'm wondering if that will bring up, we could think femininity, but despite that, then looking at the fact that the North Node is conjunct and Neptune, the natal Venus.
I mean, I think it's really what it comes down to is the transits are demanding them to have some kind of focused, strong strategy, and the chart. The natal chart is saying, I can't do that. That's not what I want to do. So this is a situation where, we're talking about Aquarius as well. We're talking about moving forward. We're talking about new ways of doing things, retiring the old, bringing in the new. And it's just the times are intense on them, but they are not wanting to be the arbiter of how this all goes. And it's all going to end up in their lap.
Well, it could be too, going back to but that Jupiter retrograde that you've been bringing up, because Justin, because of the fact that they're dialoguing back and forth. What is real essential? What is the hearth that we're trying to protect? Go ahead, Justin.
But I would say also, if we look to the future, this court's going to change. Mm-hmm. I mean, because once that Pluto, it has its Pluto return, and 2 years from now, I say watch this court in about 2 years, right around 27 is when they'll have that not this Mars return, but the next Mars return. Jupiter's going to be right there along with the South Node. Going to go over that Jupiter, Mars, Uranus, and Leo. And then, of course, a little bit further down the road, they have the Pluto return. This court is going to change. It hasn't been changing with all the rest of the government right now, but it's going to change.
And the nodes will be different then too. We won't be in Pisces. Of course, this was. Let me see. Yeah,
it'll be in Leo. It'll be in Leo.
Exactly.
In a couple of years.
Yeah. which
Great.
is Aquarius too.
Yeah, there's
And
Aquarius.
the other
again.
thing too is, we talk about the United States Pluto return, but there's something bigger that's actually coming that I keep telling people to pay attention to, is when Pluto hits the United States South Node. Pluto conjunct the South Node is just as big as Pluto return. It's like, because the South Node, Ketu, is all
6
about
degrees,
change.
right?
And
6 degrees Aquarius.
chaos and change and disruption. And Pluto hits that in the second house, which is our values. We're about ready to go through a whole shift in our values. And
Yes,
and that's going to be even bigger. And I think it's going to encompass, because the Aquarius here, it's going to encompass the Supreme Court here.
Yeah.
Well, there's many factors in this dynamic story that we're living, and change is certainly the baseline. I do thank both of you, Justin Crockett-Elsie and Rob Passetti. It's good. And for all of you out there, just lead in your best path with the people and the things that are deep in your heart. It matters. It connects. It magnetizes. Yeah, it's a little spiritual woo-woo, but it works. It works. That's the name of the game.
Thanks,
For
guys.
light, there is light.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.